Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
The Israeli army arrested a leader from the Islamic Jihad movement and 5 other Palestinians during an incursion operation in the city of Jenin in the northern West Bank. Clashes erupted in the city between armed Palestinians and Israeli soldiers during the operation. However, news reports did not disclose information about the injuries. The Israeli army increased its checkpoints in the West Bank, especially around the city of Jenin, where the Palestinian man who carried out the Khudera operation lived. Political observers believe that the incursion, which included 40 tanks and military vehicles under the cover of 2 military helicopters, was in preparation for a large Israeli military operation that may be carried out in the Palestinian lands.
وفي قطاع غزة شن الطيران الإسرائيلي غارات جوية من دون أن تسفر عن وقوع.
In the Gaza Strip, the Israeli Air Force launched airstrikes targeting the roads that lead to the Gaza city and Beit Hanun without causing any injuries. However, these strikes resulted in the destruction of a number of Palestinian agricultural fields north of the Gaza Strip. Israel also used sound bombs as a tactic to scare the Palestinians. In another development, the Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon threatened to hold an open-ended military operation against armed Palestinian factions. Sharon said it is unlikely to hold any talks with the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas until he takes harsh measures against Palestinian activists, accusing Abbas of not taking sufficient actions to fight what he called terrorism.
Yesterday we were exposed to dangerous terrorist operations in the city of Hadara. Unfortunately, the Palestinian Authority is not taking formal or informal measures to fight terrorism. Therefore, we decided to take it upon ourselves to fight terrorism in a wide-scale operation. We are not ready to accept the continuation of terrorism under any circumstances. Our attack will be wide-scale, and we will not stop until terrorism ends.
Sharon said that Iran should be expelled from the United Nations after its President Mahmoud Ahmadi Najats called for erasing Israel from the world map. Meanwhile, the European Union leaders condemned what was said by Najat and released a statement during a summit they held in Britain, saying that no country that considers itself to be a responsible member of the international community can make such a comment. Different European countries called on their diplomatic envoys to Iran to protest the Iranian president's statements. Iraqi Shiite political parties decided to run for the upcoming parliamentary elections under the previous United Iraqi Alliance slate, which will include representatives from all Shiite parties, including the Badr organization, the military wing of the Higher Council for the Islamic Revolution, as the Muqtada Sadr movement. The Sadr movement was hoping to run in the elections as an independent party, which explains why it is still negotiating joining the United Iraqi Alliance with other Iraqi Shiite forces. This is happening amidst talks about the possibility of removing the liberal movement led by Ahmed Chalabi from the slate, following disputes over the number of seats that each party should get. Meanwhile, on the ground, the American army said that 2 of its soldiers were killed when a roadside bomb exploded in eastern Baghdad on Wednesday as an American convoy was passing by. Also, 2 Iraqi policemen and more than 20 members of the Mahdi army were killed during clashes in the city of Ba'quba. In the first step of its kind, since the United States toppled the Taliban regime in Afghanistan in 2001, Islamabad handed 14 Taliban members to Afghanistan who fled to Pakistan. Most prominent of them are the 2 spokesmen of the Taliban movement, Abdul Latif Hakimi and Muhammad Yasir. The 14 wanted Taliban members were transported to Afghanistan aboard a military aircraft while they were blindfolded and handcuffed. They will be tried for their role in committing violence against the Afghani government and the multinational forces stationed in Afghanistan. The Afghani government praised the handing over of these men, but urged its neighbor to pursue other Taliban extremist suspects in its territories.
At least 21 Iraqis and 2 policemen were killed today when they clashed with insurgents southeast of Baghdad. An Interior Ministry official said another 5 policemen and 12 members of loyal to Muqtada Sadr were wounded in the battle, which erupted after they tried to rescue a Mahdi army member who was being held hostage. In another incident, officials said 3 US soldiers were killed by a roadside bomb in Baghdad and 5 Iraqis died in other insurgent attacks today. Meanwhile, US aircraft kept up their attacks on militant safe houses near the Syrian border, apparently killing a senior Al-Qaeda and Iraq figure. The US military said today 2 US Army soldiers were killed yesterday when their convoy hit a roadside bomb in eastern Baghdad, while another roadside bomb and small arms fire struck an army patrol 60 kilometers north of Baghdad, killing 1 American soldier and wounding 4. Also in Baghdad today, a suicide attacker rammed his car into an American military convoy in Karada, a commercial and residential district this morning, killing 1 Iraqi passerby, wounding 9 others and damaging 2 parked cars. Elsewhere today, 3 Iraqis were killed in insurgent attacks. Security was visibly tight around Hampton Court in London today as Prime Minister Tony Blair hosted a European Union summit aimed at ending a sense of drift after the demise of the European Union's proposed constitution. After welcoming the various leaders to the informal summit, Blair hosted roundtable talks in which it was expected that issues such as the future of the European Union's stance on globalization and its spending budget would be high on the agenda. Blair has stressed that the need to make economic renewal a high priority for the EU to enable the 25-nation bloc to meet the challenges of the globalization. Blair said he hoped the EU leaders would at least endorse a paper drawn up by the EU Executive Commission which identifies growing competition from China and India as a major challenge. As European leaders and Russia added support to a growing international condemnation of Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad's call for the destruction of Israel, the Iranian government today urged its citizens to join mass protests against Israel. EU leaders meeting at a summit in England issued a joint statement today in reaction to Ahmadinejad's comments the previous day. Addressing a conference entitled A World Without Zionism in Tehran yesterday, Ahmadinejad said the late Iranian spiritual leader Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini's prediction that Israel would be destroyed would be soon to be realized. Across the EU, Iranian ambassadors were summoned to be officially informed of Europe's anger over the remarks.
Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad has described the Zionist Israel as an illegal regime and called on the world Muslims to remain vigilant against that regime's expansionist policies. President Ahmadinejad, who was speaking Thursday at a Tehran conference dubbed A World Free of Zionism, also stressed Tel Aviv's recent withdrawal from Gaza is not genuine, but an excuse for its government to put further pressure on the Muslim world and thereby attempt to legalize the Zionist regime. The Iranian president, meanwhile, has called for the overthrow of Tel Aviv's government, a statement which received certain European countries' opposition. Reuters news agency reports several European countries such as Britain, Spain, France, Italy, and Germany have summoned Iranian ambassadors to offer their opposition against the president's remarks. Meanwhile, according to Agence France Presse from Hampton Court in Britain, the European countries at their annual meeting criticized in a statement President Ahmadinejad's remarks. A spokesman for U.S. State Department, too, called President Ahmadinejad's remarks, quote, irresponsible, while Russian foreign ministers said Iranian president's statements are unacceptable. Iranian embassy in France released a statement Thursday saying President Ahmadinejad's remarks on the Zionist regime of Israel come as a reaction to Tel Aviv's frequent threats over attacking Tehran. The statement, meanwhile, reaffirms Iran's stance over the occupied Palestine, which includes putting an end to occupation, setting up a Palestinian government, and the return of all Palestinian refugees to their homeland. The statement also stresses Iran is against Zionist expansionism based on occupation and racism, not the Jewish community. Iranian Foreign Minister Mansour Mottaki said hasty reactions by the European countries to the comments made by Iranian President Ahmadi Najats were to cover up the recent crimes of the Zionist regime in the occupied lands. Iranian Foreign Minister added the Zionist regime has always ignored the 2 UN resolutions adopted last week, which, as he said, is the major source of concern for the world. Mottaki wanted to say President Ahmadi Najats' comments reflect Iranian policy, which has never recognized the Zionist regime.
And now to the strong reaction both here and abroad to yesterday's call by Iran's President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. Vice Premier Shimon Peres says Iran should be expelled from the United Nations. Peres was speaking following a meeting in Tel Aviv this morning with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. Lavrov says his country views the Iranian president's statement with the greatest severity and added that Moscow opposes the acquisition of nuclear arms by Iran. Peres said Iran's intentions are especially ominous because of its efforts to acquire nuclear weapons and to develop long-range missiles.
It's unprecedented. Since 1945, the establishment of the United Nations, no head of state, which is a member of the United Nations, ever called for the destruction of another member of the United Nations publicly and clearly, as the President of Iran did. It is against the Charter of the United Nations. It is against the practice of the United Nations. And you cannot have a charter where some of the people are for peace and self-defense, and others are for the destruction of it. I mean, we saw already crazy declarations and crazy appearances in the past. Sometimes we didn't take it very seriously, but when you see such a crazy declaration being done by an elected head of state, a member of the United Nations, it's unbearable. You cannot remain a member, or you have to change the charter.
Actually, I have not seen, I've seen what he actually said. I've seen the press reports and immediately asked my people to verify exactly what was said. I don't agree that anybody should challenge the right of any UN member to exist. This is indeed inadmissible.
There has also been international condemnation of Iranian calls to wipe Israel off the map. European Commission President Jose Manuel Barroso labeled remarks by the Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad as unacceptable. Australian Prime Minister John Howard called the speech dangerous. Britain summoned Iran's chargé d'affaires in London to explain what the Foreign Office described as sickening comments. Spanish Foreign Minister Miguel Moratinos rejected in the sharpest terms the Iranian president's remarks and summoned Tehran's ambassador to Madrid to demand an explanation. The French Foreign Ministry also summoned Iran's ambassador, calling the comments unacceptable. The same term was used by Germany to condemn the announcement. And Washington said the remarks underline U.S. concerns about Iranian nuclear ambitions, a theme repeated by Foreign Minister Silvan Shalom.
Israel is deeply concerned about Iran's ongoing nuclear and missile activities. This concern is shared by the International Atomic Energy Agency and key international players. We believe that the international community, and Russia as one of its leading players, must take every necessary step to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons capabilities. A nuclear Iran would be a nightmare not only for Israel, but for Russia and the entire international community as well. This is why we believe that the matter should be referred to the UN Security Council as early as possible. If Iran does not comply with its international obligations and continues to threaten global security, then sanctions must be initiated, and the sooner the better.
The Iranian president's call to destroy Israel will become the ultimate test for the United Nations' credibility in the international community. This according to former UN Ambassador Dr. Dori Gold. He was speaking to IBA's Dan Diker in this exclusive interview.
Well, Israel has experienced for years terrorist organizations have called for Israel's elimination. But the statements by the Iranian president come in the context of a massive international dispute over the intentions behind the Iranian nuclear program. There are many countries in the world that have civilian nuclear technology, but there's now only one country in the world that has actually called for wiping off the map a fellow member of the United Nations, and that's the case of Iran.
Dr. Gold, what in your view accounts for the unusually harsh and round condemnation of the Iranian president's comments by many in the international community?
There's no doubt that if the international community had not been involved in negotiating with Iran, particularly the members of the European Union, over its nuclear program, then its response to the Iranian statements would have been far more diluted. The fact that Iran has had for years a clandestine nuclear weapons program makes the Iranian statements about eliminating Israel all that more serious.
Dr. Gold, Vice Premier Perez and the Prime Minister have both called for the expulsion of Iran from the United Nations. How realistic a move is that?
Well, I don't think many people read the UN Charter these days, but it is the founding document of the United Nations. And in Chapter 1, Article 2 of the UN Charter, it states absolutely clearly that UN members are not supposed to threaten one another with the use of force. Clearly, Iran has violated a founding document of the United Nations, which raises questions of whether it adheres to the principles upon which its UN membership is based. Certainly what Iran has done today in light of its nuclear weapons program requires a firm response by the UN Security Council and by the UN Secretary General.
Observers believe that the reactions to the latest statements made by Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadi Najat that the world will soon witness an end to the Israeli entity is an attempt to exploit these statements to increase pressure on Iran over its nuclear file.
At a conference titled "A World Without Zionism" in this auditorium in the center of the capital of Tehran and in front of hundreds of students who wore green bands on their heads in solidarity with al-Mujahideen, Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadi Najat gave a speech about the Israeli entity which stirred wide-scale controversy in America, Europe, and especially Tel Aviv.
I have no doubt that the new wave of morale and awakening in the Palestinian territories and the rest of the Islamic world will soon erase this setback.
Media agencies reported different versions of Ahmadi Najat's statements, which in fact did not call for erasing the presence of Israel or its taking it off the map, but it was an analytical comment of the bitter Palestinian reality, which, according to Najat, is playing the role of defending the Islamic nation. His comments bring to mind the famous statement of the late founder of the Islamic Revolution, Imam al-Khomeini, in which he said, "If every Muslim would pour a bucket of water on Israel, it would drown." Najat's comments generated a lot of controversy in the United States and European countries, some of which called on the Iranian ambassador to confront him with official protests.
It is normal that various countries have different questions about Iran's position. We will make announcements about our position in the upcoming meetings. We don't see this as an important matter because Iran's position towards the Zionist entity and its crimes is clear to everyone.
Washington considered that Najat's statements, which coincide with Jerusalem International Day, justify its concerns over the Iranian nuclear file.
The demonstrations, the receptions, and welcomes were great. We feel that Iranians are our brothers in blood as well.
Since the victory of the Islamic Revolution in Iran, the Palestinian plight has remained one of the main points of difference with the West, which ended the Shah's strategic alliance with the West and Israel. Perhaps the West's wide-scale, quick and coordinated reactions to Ahmadi Najat's statements provokes many questions about attempts to exploit these statements as a justification to increase pressure against Tehran over its nuclear file. Although these statements were sharp, they did not go beyond the diplomatic framework of Iran's position towards the Palestinian plight, in which Tehran considers the Israeli entity as an illegitimate regime because it is based on occupation. Iran expressed its position several times, the latest of which was expressed by the leader of the Islamic Revolution, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who spoke about the possibility of resolving the Palestinian issue by using international standards to create one state which depends on giving the majority their rights, even if the majority is Jewish. Naveed Durs, Al-Alam TV, Tehran.
ومن طهران ينضم إلينا الكاتب والمحلل السياسي.
From Tehran, we have with us our political writer and analyst, Mr. Amir Al-Musawi. Mr. Amir, first, what is your view on the international reactions to the latest statements made by Iranian President Ahmadi Najats?
Actually, these reactions confirm the contradictions among the European countries and other nations that call for human rights and democracy. Because Dr. Ahmadi Najats said the same thing as the leader of the Iranian Islamic Revolution, Imam Ali Khamenei. He said that the Zionist entity is not democratic because it is based on occupation and exploitation. He also said that free elections should be held in the Palestinian territories with the participation of all citizens, Christians, Muslims, and Jews, and that the right of the majority should be recognized as such, even if the majority is Jewish. Thus, Najats was making a democratic presentation according to the United Nations and international treaties. However, regretfully, the various plans being presented for the region by the European nations and the United States in particular indicate how they want democracy in one area, but they do not want it in other areas. Now, we are seeing how they are trying to prevent Hamas from participating in the upcoming legislative elections. In reality, I think that Najat's statements has revealed the contradictions and double standards among the United States and the European nations.
إلى الشأن العراقي ومع الازدياد المضطرد في عدد
Washington confirmed that 2,000 American soldiers have been killed since the start of the Iraqi war. Americans reacted differently to the news. The majority of them called on the government to have a clear plan regarding an American withdrawal from Iraq. However, Iraqis believe that the actual number of American fatalities far exceeds the 2,000 figure announced by the U.S. State Department.
استدعى إعلان واشنطن أن عدد قتلى احتلالها العراق بلغ 2,000 جندي أمريكي.
Washington claimed that the number of U.S. soldiers killed in the war is 2,000. American citizens and officials reacted differently to the news. Republicans in the U.S. Senate used the announcement to reiterate what their president has been saying all along of keeping the heat on Iraq for the sake of the Iraqi people and for the security of the United States. However, the Democrats used the State Department's announcement to criticize the Bush Doctrine, accusing the current administration of flaring up the security situation in Iraq rather than cooling it off, adding this latest figure is further derailing the political and security situation in Iraq. Some U.S. senators and congressmen voiced their anger and frustration over Bush's policy in Iraq, accusing the president of ignoring the lessons learned from the Vietnam War and the invasion of Iraq. The Bush administration alleged that if the U.S. withdraws its forces from Iraq, a civil war may erupt. However, the Democrats questioned that allegation, adding, when will it ever be feasible to withdraw from Iraq, and how to get out of this mess? Meanwhile, reactions of victims' families varied. Some voiced their approval of the war and the sacrifices provided by their relatives, while others voiced their anger and frustration, calling on Bush to end the war now. This illegal war killed 2,000 Americans and hundreds of thousands of innocent Iraqis. Some critics believe that the announcement of the latest figure intended to focus on the lives and ambitions of those individuals killed rather than on the lies and fabrications which the war was based on.
I don't think that the number...
I do not think the number is important. What is important is who was number 1998 or 1999, is who are those people who were killed.
I do not think the U.S. should have gone into Iraq.
The Iraqi newspapers published the State Department's latest number of U.S. fatalities. Many Iraqis believe that the actual number is significantly higher than 2,000.
I believe the number of 2,000 U.S. fatalities is very low. 4 or 5 or 6 or even 20 suicide attacks will kill that many people, especially as the number of suicide operations against Americans is on the rise. The announced number of U.S. fatalities is much lower than the actual number. The real figure is many times higher.
يشار إلى أن سيندي شيهان والدة أحد الجنود الأمريكيين.
Cindy Sheehan, the mother of an American soldier killed in Iraq who held a sit-in at the White House lawn calling for the American withdrawal from Iraq, stressed the importance of raising American awareness. Furthermore, Sheehan called on media outlets to make a list of the charges against American officials for lying to the American people and misleading the international community in this illegal, immoral, and disastrous war. The holy month of Ramadan in northern Lebanon city of Tripoli is different from any other Lebanese city. Residents of Tripoli have their unique and special customs and traditions during this blessed month, in which some spend their days in Sufi meditation chambers, while other residents spend them in neighborhoods where every day storytellers recount stories during Ramadan.
The latest events in Lebanon have not prevented the Lebanese from celebrating the holy month of Ramadan and practicing their traditions and customs, which are most pronounced in the northern mountainous city of Tripoli, especially in the old neighborhoods which were built in the beginning of the 12th century. The city is famous for its many mosques and Sufi centers where Tarawih prayers are offered and religious lessons are heard.
تشتهر بكثرة المساجد والخلوات الصوفية حيث تصلى التراويح وتتلى الدروس الدينية.
The
holy month of Ramadan is special in this city. Through its markets and religious practices, all the residents of Tripoli hold on to and practice these customs with happiness and love. During the holy month of Ramadan, the city relives its rich history of culture and heritage. Ramadan is also an occasion for people to visit family and friends.
في هذه الأحياء
In these neighborhoods, the various stores exhibit their jewelry, goods, and the unique Tripoli sweets, like the cheese dessert, kanafa, mahlabiya, and killaj. In the evening, Tripoli residents sit at coffee houses and gathering areas throughout the Barzakhan markets, Khayatin tents, and shoe markets to listen to the storytellers who tell stories about Arab and Islamic history as people smoke water pipes. There is a special flavor during the holy month of Ramadan in the city of Tripoli. Whoever enters inside the city's markets will be impressed to see that all the traditional customs of Ramadan are present. Carolyn Bayani, Abu Dhabi TV, Tripoli.
فالداخل إلى أسواقها يظهره حضور الشهر بكامل طقوسه. كارولين بعيني، قناة أبو ظبي، طرابلس، شمال لبنان.
The views expressed on Mosaic are not those of Link TV or its sponsors, but of the broadcasters themselves. Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation and Henry and Virgilia Dakin.